Alright, what is poppin', people? So, I don't really know where this game, or not this game, this informational, I guess I'll put it, video is gonna go, but I wanted to talk about how getting suspect requirements felt for me for this Beware plus Pangoro test. Kind of just the general thoughts that I ended up having throughout. Things I noticed, etc., what have you. Before we get into that, I'll drop the every, few videos or so reminder that if you aren't subscribed, well, you know what? Maybe you should subscribe. Helps the channel. Helps keep me really motivated. And hey, you won't miss out on a video. And so it's really just do it. So, I first want to look at the teams that I used. So I started off, I wanted to use just this balance build I'd used. If you watch Joey's videos, then you saw him use it for a few games. It's just some sub-split Haunter stuff, right? I wanted to try it out because I thought Haunter seemed pretty cool. It's a fast special wall breaker, and in Beware's metagame, I think having one of those is also just a really good way of keeping it from running through your teams. Obviously, if you look at Beware's special bulk compared to the physical bulk, it's a lot worse. It doesn't, you don't have to worry about Fluffy. Well, you do if it's trading, if you're using trading kits. You don't have to worry about Fluffy as much. And its special defense is just lower than its physical defense. And so, Haunter's a cool way to try to beat it, outside of me using something like, I don't know, a Salazzle, if you want to look at something more prevalent. And I also thought that Sub-Haunter could be cool to help deal with potential revenge killers, like, say, Flygon or Mienshao. If I got a sub up, well, they can't revenge kill you. So it can force your opponent into a lot of uncomfortable situations. I didn't use this game for too many of my Reqs. I think I used it a couple times before I got into 5 games, and I was just like, okay, I have to grind out over 30 games. And knowing my laddering abilities, because I just don't... I'm not a good ladderer, I'll put it that way. I think it takes a certain skill to be a consistent ladder player, because you have to know how typically the ladder works, in terms of how the players on the ladder will work, or think, compared to players that maybe you're playing in a best of 3 series. But I swapped off this because I'm just like, man, I'm gonna have to play so many games. I don't want to take too long. So then I switched to Lax's Hail team that he posted, and I made a couple adjustments because there were a few things that I personally wasn't a fan of. I just maxed out Arctivicious speed because I felt, I don't know. I'll be honest, I didn't know what the special attack did. And because I knew I was going to see this team on ladder, I was like, you know what, may as well be as fast as I can. I also made Dragalge just slightly faster because I didn't know if the special attack did anything, so I was just like, hey, if I run into this exact team, then I can get the jump on the Dragalge. And then on his Decidueye, I made it Brave Bird instead of Sucker Punch because I ran into a Beware with this team, and then I was like, oh, I can't beat that. And I also made it Jolly. But I used this team for definitely like 40 plus games of Reqs. I had been wanting to use Hail anyway, and I knew that if I'm playing against Beware and Pangoro, something that could be a good limiting factor is if they're matching into offense consistently. Beware and Pangoro are not good into offense. Beware is a little bit better because at least Fluffy lets you sort of check certain physical attackers, especially if you're Choppleberry. You could potentially deal with some of the setup sweepers like Dragon Dance, Tyrantrum, or opposing Swords Dance Beware, for example. And so, I thought, okay, an offense build probably will do me good. There were a few things I learned. One, Pangoro just doesn't work into offense. When you queue up these just at least hyper offense, maybe some slower offense builds it could still do some damage to. But every time I queued into a Pangoro, the most my opponent was able to do with it was bullet punch my Aurorus, or death fodder to Arctivish Fishes. I felt very safe into Pangoro all the time, but Beware I still didn't really, right? So, the issue with Beware was that it's bulky enough still because of Fluffy to take some ridiculously strong hits, even without Choppleberry. Arctivicious Vicious Rend I think does about 70 max. And that's still really good damage, but it's not enough. Decidueye if I don't set up, then Brave Bird sure as hell isn't KOing you. Alolan Sandslash, it needs the Arctivish chip. Otherwise, Triple Axle is just not breaking through Beware because it does so little damage. And even with Widelands, I swear you miss this move far too frequently, but that's beside the point. Beware's offense matchup, though, was surprisingly, like, still decent. Much of the time when I was matching into it, again, this is why I changed this to Brave Bird, I would make it a point to try to get that Sword Stance off of Decidueye, because I knew otherwise I'm just not beating the bear. And there were still ways I could limit it. Dragalge could take a hit if it's, like, at full. Sometimes people would lead Beware, and so what I would just do is I'd just Blizzard immediately with Auroras, because I wanted to immediately get as much damage as I could onto the bear. And that would also be a pretty decent way of softening it up for the Arctivish. One thing I did learn, Fizz Def Rocky Helmet Beware beats Hail. The Arctivish, I did 27. I don't know what you want from me, I did 27 to a Beware. It was max powered Fish's Red, man. God, I was so upset. Thoughts on just Hail as a whole, though, as well. I think Hail is a little bit better than I gave it credit for. Originally, I wasn't too sure, because in the latter games I'd played against it, I was like, okay. My opponent either got a little lucky, and I think we saw some games that was the case, or I just was caught off guard because I just didn't know how to play against Hail. Those were the early games. And in some games, I was just like by the end, I felt, okay, I have a generally decent game plan of how I need to play this Hail matchup. And that's usually how, one, building a new team works. You gotta learn the matchups that the team has to play differently into, compared to just how it looks like it would work in the team builder. But you also have to look at, okay, how do I play into... Okay, I think I said both things I meant to say. Okay, whatever. But you get what I'm trying to say, right? I was trying to learn, okay, how do I play into Hail as a whole? Not just, like, with a team-specific thing. And even and by the end of, like, the first maybe, like, 5 games I'd played against it, I felt, okay, I have a generally good idea of how Hail works. Well, using it's a lot different. I feel like a lot of the games, whereas people have generally said you use Arctivish to soften up for Alolan Sandslash, I felt games never got there. It was either I win with Arctivish because I get a Freeze Dry predict right, and I catch their Mantine or their Gastrodon, or what have you, whatever, you know, water immunity they maybe have. I catch that with the Freeze Dry. Or I just lose, because Alolan Sandslash just couldn't deal with, or it couldn't clean late. This mod's not good. That's, I think, the biggest thing that I took from Hail. Outside of, you know, maybe Hail being a little bit better than I thought it was. This is the weak point, and the limiting factor on Hail. While I think some people saying, oh, we shouldn't rank niche hyper offense playstyles because they're just fads, well, I think there is some validity to that. I think it's a little bit of I think it's a little bit of Doomer talk. You know, you got Boomer talk, you got Doomer talk as well. It's Doom saying. I think Hail is actually not bad. I don't know if I'd call it good. It's matchup fishy. I felt like there were a fair few matchups that were bad. Like, when I queued into random Gigalith, I felt worthless. And maybe it was because I didn't play aggressive with my Arctivish enough. Maybe it's because I'm Life Orbed, so I was getting worn down too quickly. But when I ran into Gigalith, and a lot of time it was always paired with a fucking water immunity, it just felt like I was put into too bad of a situation to actually make progress. And so, you know, without Hail, I was getting outsped. And the second thing, right? Scarf Mienshao, just demon. You have a resist, you have an immunity to CC, but it still ends up having so much leverage over games. And you're forced to always predict right on the U-turns versus the close combats. Because if you constantly let it wear down at say Dragalge, or maybe even remove Decidueye with a knockoff, you just lose. And because it's so fast, it just outspeeds and CCs this. It outspeeds and CCs this, even under Hail. I also want to go back to this. This Pokemon just doesn't clean ever. I don't know why. It could have just been that I was too reliant at a point on having Arctivish win. But I felt like this spawn really didn't do anything ever. It's so weak. And it's not like you can afford Sword Stance, because I think you really do need Rapid Spin. And you really need these moves for coverage. And then you really need a stab attack. And so much of the time, I'm just like not doing enough damage to break through things like, say, Arcanine. You know, I don't... Some people just fodder Arcanine versus me, and I never understood why. But, like, I couldn't break through Arcanine, or maybe I couldn't break through the Beware. Or whatever, just rogue, physically kind of bulky mod. Even like a Bronzong, man. I don't Oko you a knockoff, and then I get blasted by a body press. It's just like, the hell do I do? Hell, even Arctivish versus Bronzong, I did like 70 with Fishes, and then I got Oko'd by body press. Maybe not Oko'd, but I took a hefty amount. Like, it was pretty much an Oko. But there were several oddly bad matchups that I didn't expect, because at the end of the day, these Pokemon just aren't strong enough. Arctivish, as I said, Arctivish suffers from that issue significantly less than Alolan Sandslash does, which I just think this Pokemon isn't good. I think Arctivish is a pretty usable mon, but even it still, 90 attack, even with a Life Orb, isn't good, and I think you really do need to be a speed boosting nature. Otherwise, Rotom Cut also outspeeds you if it's Scarf, so that's great. I'm not being slower than literally every Scarfer, that's just not happening. But, as we were saying, you still just, because you don't go CB, because I think Life Orb is necessary to give you a little bit more leverage around the water means, because you're not CB, you lose out on a little extra damage. Because you're not, maybe, you know, Adamant or Naughty or whatever attack boosting nature, you lose out on a little bit more damage. And it can really impact a lot of your damage rolls. You know, you don't Oko Tyrantrum with this set. And yeah, I'm sure you can tell what Head Smash does back to you. So that was always a little bit of a pressing issue. I always had to make sure I could monitor my Tyrantrum matchup, just because, you know, if it gets a free switch in and it's Scarf, then it's blasting something every time it gets in. It was a very dangerous Pokemon. And so that was very interesting to see. Just realizing how bad this mon was. Realizing, though, that this also is a pretty competent mon. I also really liked Earthquake on Aurorus, and this is really where I think Hail shines. Just the early game of these two Pokemon. And then whatever these two decide to do early game as well. Aurorus was surprisingly effective at preventing opposing offensive teams from just running me over. People would love to lead Blastoise against Aurorus, and Encore turn 1 was always the play. They'd always Shell Smash turn 1, it's like, no. It's like, even if they deny rocks by surfing twice, right? I don't really care. And even then I could, you know, if I lock them into Surf, I got 2 water immunes. Or not immunes, I got 3 water resists on the team that could take it up boosted Surf. But people would be really willing to go for that Smash turn 1, and this mod is so good at preventing opposing people from trying to cheese you with, you know, just leading an offensive setup sweeper and then running your shit down. Earthquake also, I mean, it did lure in Copper Rajas a few times, and depending on their spread, I could do like over half occasionally too. That was pretty fun to learn. I don't know if it was really necessary overall. I feel like sometimes I would have actually preferred to have max special attack and just gone Earth Power and hope to do a little bit to Copper. But I think this was really good at dissuading the opposing offense matchup. And now we get to the last team. Again, I use this probably for like, I'm gonna say probably 45 of my games. And if you, oh, I don't think I can really go to a chat room right now because I'm on my main. Full disclosure. Oh, I can go to here. Yeah, so let me show you how many games it took me to get my requirements. Yeah, this was tough. I barely 1470 elo still, so it's not like I can't ladder. I'm glad I could at least instill a little bit of confidence back in myself. 80% win rate on the ladder is pretty fucking good. As we see on my main, I probably hovered down near like 60, 65, which is still fine, but obviously not good for if you're trying to climb the ladder. And so for the last few games, I was like, alright, we need to do something else. There's a little bit too much matchup-y stuff that I didn't like. So Davon put this great team in the NU chat. I'll just click all the Pokemon real quick, so if you want to steal the team, you can very easily. I was really glad that this set was in here. I think it should probably be Oblivious, all things said. I guess you could Sludge Bomb Poison a Dragalagy as it switches in, though, so maybe that's cool. But so he posted this cool screen steam, and Celebi's a really cool bond. I believe the 30... I'm assuming the 36 defense, at least, is so Mienshao U-turn never KOs you. It was very cool being able to consistently lead with my Celebi and set rocks versus Mienshao, though. And I also made a lot of good work out of Healing Wish. Few things I note from this team. Blastoise, yes, Spadef, Mantine. Mantine as a whole, yeah. You don't break that. And so you're really reliant on Salazzle to do that for you, or like Beware to, you know, maybe draw them in and say, okay, +2 double edge. Good night, Mantine. You deserve a good rest. We also had Espeon as the screen setter instead of Xatu. Probably would have preferred Xatu. Actually, I will say this. I think Espeon was kind of helpful in the games that I was using it, because being able to just chunk a few things with some psychic damage was pretty cool. And dissuading setup sweepers, like, God, I was about to get Sub-Quiver Dance Frostmoth. I mean, look at this team. Do you think I can beat that? I mean, I have a Salazzle, so maybe. But, you know, Yawn just... It's another great way, like Encore Aurorus is, at preventing your opponent with these other offense teams or just offensive techs, or offensive sets, not really techs, from going ham versus you. And it was really fun to try to like work out between all of these sweepers what was my best way. And when I was using this team again, this is the only... I used 2 Beware teams. I didn't use Pangoro during the laddering. My mind has been made up on Goro for a while now. I think it just needs to go. Beware I also thought needed to go, but I wanted to still use it just to like make sure that I was sold. The only reason I was more sold on Pangoro was because I feel like the way that it interacts with the other fighting types was a little bit shit. If you get rid of Goro, you add in Arcanine as a more consistent answer overall, at least, to fighters. And you take a little bit of pressure off of things like Vileplume, because they no longer have to run itemless to try to handle Pangoro. That's beside the point, anyhow. Beware during this was so fucking good. It's just... Look, here's my points on Beware and why I think arguing against a ban on it's a little bit meh. This combination right here, just... It invalidates so much defensive, or not defensive, offensive counterplay. While you can always argue that, yes, there are special wall breakers, some even, of the psychic type, that can revenge kill Beware, it's like, it doesn't really matter. You're not trying to beat offense with Beware, you're trying to beat balance and some bulkier builds. And Beware does that to an amazing extent, because their speed control much of the time will be a Scarf Mienshao, or even a Scarf Flygon. And while Flygon's Earthquake ignores Fluffy, it still doesn't KO you. So that was... It was put on full display during my ladder. DD Tyrantrum. Now I feel like if you're running Tyrantrum, the play might just be Honeclaw's Scale Shot. I don't know, this mon, the only thing that it ever did was KO the last Pokemon on a team once, with Outrage. Sash Salazzle, though, is something that we had talked a little bit about in the VR Council chat, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, I think it should have been in there. And someone talked about this set, and I was like, okay, I want to use this. I made a team, I didn't like it. But, so when I saw that this team had one, I was super excited. And yeah, this is really good. Mienshao only revenge kills you if it's Stone Edge. Otherwise, okay, I mean, you can revenge kill you with knockoff, but it requires a good amount of chip. And Dragon Pulse is a surprisingly nice last move, because people are very willing to give you their Flygons. People are very willing to give you their Tyrantrums. You know, those are 2 of the most obvious switch-ins otherwise. And to just talk about, like, maybe some team synergy, I felt like these 2 really synergized well together. I found that it was pretty easy with Salazzle to just chip the ever-loving hell out of Mantine with a +2 Sludge Bomb. I also found it was pretty easy with Nascot Salazzle to just win games, frankly. But that's beside the point. I thought this mod was really good at getting those bulky water types just worn down out of the way. And so Blastoise, now let me close that. Blastoise was really, really effective from there. Now, as we did say earlier, this mod still doesn't like Mantine. I did 31 with a +2 Dark Pulse. Like, what do you want from me? But it's still a pretty good Pokemon, and I think it's just... because of how bulky it is, you get a surprising amount of leverage against Revenge Killers even with your screens down. And when we talk about Revenge Killers to Blastoise, all we can really consider as Revenge Killers are priority users. You know, disregarding Pokemon that can take a hit. But we're talking about priority users, so First Impression Flygon, or Golisopod, or I guess Decidueye when you get low enough with its Shadow Sneak. You're actually faster than Mienshao, even with Modest. Mienshao hits 508, I believe, with a Choice Scarf, and you hit 510 after a Shell Smash. And so Blastoise can be really hard for a lot of these teams to deal with if they do not have a bulky water type. Because you get that Smash off, and then there's not a lot that takes hits. And it's something that I've iterated several times in the recent lives. But one of the reasons I think offensive water types like Blastoise, for instance, Starmie, even Inteleon, are so good right now, even Kingdra to some degree, but I view it a little bit more like a dragon type, if that makes sense. But why I think they're so good is because the answers to offensive water types right now are what? Well, Gastron and Mantine, sure, but those are a little bit less common than I'd like them to be. A lot of the time it's Dragalge, a lot of the time it's Vileplume is like a water resist, Rotom Cut is like a water resist. Pokemon that just don't beat these. They just don't. You know, at least not consistently. And so I find that these Pokemon have a very easy time going just ham in a lot of matchups. And while I don't think I got that luxury with Blastoise too much in the like 6 or so games I played with this team, I still felt that its presence in these games was really helpful, especially when I could use it to try to wall break early and then have like Healing Wish, Celebi. So for those that don't know, Healing Wish's mechanic got changed between Gen 7 and Gen 8. How it used to work is you use Healing Wish, and immediately when you go to a next Pokemon, the Healing Wish activates, even if it's at full. It's more complicated now, so how Healing Wish works now is you use it. If you go to a Pokemon that has not yet taken damage, and when I say not yet taken damage, what I mean is Healing Wish is activating before everything else upon switch in, before hazards. If you go to a Pokemon that's at full, it will store the Healing Wish. If you didn't go back to that Pokemon after, say, it's taken Stealth Rock, that's when it'll activate. And so what you can do, and because Hyper Offense is really good about keeping Pokemon at full, you can use that Healing Wish to maybe deny a Defog, for instance. And then you can store it and say, okay, I'm going to break with one of these two, for instance, or even Salazzle. This is the truly dirty one. You can store that Healing Wish, eventually go back to that Pokemon after its after it wall breaks, has taken some damage, and then it'll just be back at full, and it's just like, well, shit. And I understand that's so funny with Salazzle's because of Focus Sash. Healing Wish restores Focus Sash, so you can get a second Sash Salazzle in your games, and that's just real fun for your opponent to try to figure out a way to deal with. It's a surprisingly hard Pokemon to pin down and punish, because you can't Revenge Kill it reliably, and if you're not careful, you might just sack your Revenge Killer too and expecting it to have like a Life Orb, because it's on HO or something. But in terms of what the Suspect Test showed me, like for Pangoro and Beware, not really a whole lot that didn't already know. I mean, when we talk about Pangoro, I was pretty set on that needing to be banned, and I was pretty set on Beware also needing to be banned. I just wanted to see the limits to how those Pokemon could, you know, what limits they could go to. And as we established, Pangoro's offense matchup, since I used that for over 50 games, we really saw on display how pitiful it is. It just non-stab, much of the time non-Iron Fist boosted Bullet Punch is about all it got versus my team that I would be bringing. And that just wasn't impactful. If it ever locked into Bullet Punch, generally that meant my opponent lost the game from there. But with Beware, seeing how, on the contrary to Pangoro, consistent it was into offense was a little bit alarming. A lot of these slower wall breakers typically don't get that great of an offense matchup just because they're, well, slow. I think back to last generation, Incineroar's matchup into offensive teams, while still pretty capable, because Incineroar had Intimidate and just generally a pretty good typing to handle a lot of the offensive Pokemon that we had, even if it was just to like a pretty, like, I'll say soft check extent. It was not like what I felt Beware's influence was. Preventing a lot of these offensive revenge killers even from being able to take it out was just so impactful. And at times, I think previously I did feel maybe Pangoro was more ban-worthy. If only because I felt that it caused a weird, like, divergence between what you could consider fighting checks, like, as a whole. Beware, I think that defensive prowess has really showed me, okay, maybe it's even more ban-worthy than Pangoro, just from, like, a perspective. And now one thing that I do want to just... do I show it? I won't show the post, because that'd be maybe a little bit of, like, a call-out. But I saw someone post talking about how they felt neither of these Pokemon are ban-worthy because they're too slow and they can be revenge killed. I'll let you decide how you feel about that perspective for yourself. But my response, and I don't think I actually said this, but my response to that is, damn, I wish I knew it was that. I should have known that all along. Just revenge kill it. Anyhow, I think it was a very limited perspective that failed to acknowledge Pangoro / Beware as a whole, and how they, like, function within the metagame. Because it's one thing, something I don't like that people will do a lot of the time in their ban or do not ban posts, a lot of the time it's their do not ban posts, they neglect to look at a Pokemon in practice and how it actually plays out in the metagame. And I think that's a lot more important. When I'm team building, one of the things that I always try to do when looking over my matchups versus, you know, key threats, I try to look at, okay, how would I actually play against this Pokemon? Looking at your team and having a defined check to everything is great, but I don't think it's practical, and I don't think it's realistic of how Pokemon works. Because at that point, you're trying to assume that the team building stage is the most important, and all that really matters. I don't think you need to have everything solved in the team building stage. If you have worries, try to find how those play out. I've built plenty of teams before where my counterplay on paper to something was, well, just don't let it switch in. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. But I think, like, you gotta actually play out some on paper bad matchups and see how those Pokemon can actually take advantage of maybe a good matchup into your team. And find out for yourself, okay, is this really that good of a matchup for them? And do I have ways while I'm playing to prevent it? But so, an overall perspective of mine, how do I feel about Pangoro and Beware? Pangoro, I will vote to ban, because I think it's just not capably walled within the tier. Scrappy negating Intimidate's, like, probably the biggest thing for it. Because you just say, okay, Intimidate Arcanine, which would check Beware very well. You don't check me, and I'm gonna CC you for, like, 80. Or I'll just knock your boots off and CC you for an Oko next time. And with Beware, it's the same conclusion, but say, okay, I'm a Beware. I'm gonna just sit in front of every teammate you try to throw at me, and unless you have some, like, special attacking psychic type or fire type, you're probably not dealing with me reliably. You know, we can look back. I think the best comparison to these two might be, well, one of them would be Pangoro and Gen 7 NU. But to Beware, I would argue Incineroar from last gen's a decent comparison. In that, it's literally the same speed tier, which helps to contextualize himself. But, like, there were faster revenge killers that 1000% would beat it. Passimian, you dropped it with a CC. Aerodactyl, you dropped it with a Stone Edge. But there were other factors that held Incineroar down beyond that still, right? Hazard weakness, general just like inability to recover health outside of its Figgy Berry, which sometimes would actually end up getting knocked if you wanted to switch it into a Passimian knockoff. With Beware, I feel like any of its issues are just so minor and don't really end up holding you back. Anyhow, this video went on for half an hour. That is a lot longer than I thought it would. Well, thank you guys for watching. I think my laddering experience was traumatizing, and I would never suggest getting suspect requirements to anyone that wants to maintain their current brain cell count, because god damn do I feel stupider after playing on the ladder. You wanna know what I lost to? I lost to Power Swap, Shell Smash, Infestation, Chuckle, that then, once it fainted, went into a Weakness Policy, Rock Polish Diancie. Yeah, that was fun. That was Mono Rock too, by the way. It had a Credillia and a Gigalith. Quite literally, I got counter-teamed. There were a lot of counter-teams on the ladder, by the way, to Hail. Like, my god. It was brutal. Anyhow, that's gonna be it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.